We're coming up on a very special 5-year anniversary for a personal journey of mine. If it was alcoholism, I'd be getting a chip for this achievement right now, but I'm receiving a very different kind of gift for it. First, I need to ask though, what have you done for 5 years straight with unwavering discipline and gusto? Mewing? Maybe? Yeah, and what do you have to show for it, tough guy? You still got that soft chin. What about jelking? You a big jelker? Spent the last 5 years in the laboratory desperately trying to put a few inches on that pathetic little meat of yours? Well, what if I told you that 5 years could have been better spent doing what I was doing? Watching One Piece from start to current. Over 1,100 episodes. Please hold your applause, I'm no hero. I just did what I thought needed to be done to finally stop getting bombarded with the question of why I didn't like One Piece. I started this journey 5 years ago, which feels like the blink of an eye now in the grand scheme of my One Piece journey, because I had tried numerous times to get into it and just never fell in love with it. But every time I would stream, I'd always be getting the question about, what's wrong with you, Charles? You gotta screw loose to not like One Piece. So I started it out of spite, and I gotta tell you, sports fans, the first year or so of that journey, for the first, 200 to 300 episodes, were brutal. Trying to stay awake watching those arcs was a more difficult boss battle than trying to kick a heroin addiction. It was tough. But I pushed through, I persisted, and I've been giving you steady updates like once a year since, because after about 300 episodes, I did fall in love with One Piece. Experts may call it Stockholm Syndrome. I call it just objective improvements in the show itself. And I understand in the manga, everyone always says this, the pacing for the earlier arcs is just significantly better in the manga as opposed to the anime. And I imagine they're probably right, but I'd committed to watching the show. And I think once we start getting into Water 7 territory, the show really hits its stride. And it maintains that. The show does get a drastic improvement not only in animation, but in pacing, and I genuinely think everything in it starts to elevate. So I'm extremely happy I did push through and catch up with the show, because it is extraordinary. So now that I'm caught up, I'm just going to give you all of my thoughts, kind of like as a all-encompassing debriefing, because like I said, I've been giving you yearly-ish updates on my One Piece progress. But I just want to put a nice little bow on all my thoughts on One Piece as a whole, and I guess I'll get into the nitty-gritty here, the spaghetti and meatballs of Egghead specifically, since that's obviously the most recent arc. But anyway, overall, I love One Piece, like I said. I think the show offers some extremely high highs, but with that comes some lows as well. In particular, Fishman Island. That is my least favorite arc in the entire series. I hated that. That was a slog to get through, and I found so little to like about Fishman Island. And I know I've yapped quite a bit about my disdain for that arc, and I'm not going to go too deep into it here, but just know that shit is poop. I do not like the green eggs and ham of Fishman Island. But my favorite arcs are as followed, in this order. My favorite arc is Marineford, followed by Innie's Lobby, followed by Dressrosa. And the more thought I put into it, the harder it became to choose what are my definitive favorite arcs, because there are some turbo bangers in here. So it's always been a bit fluid, but the one that's never changed as my favorite arc is Marineford. That one's pretty unbeatable, but the rest have kind of moved here and there, ebbed and flowed. And I know Dressrosa in particular is a bit of a contentious pick to be in my top 3 arcs. Worth noting, I watched One Piece, so it cut out a lot of filler, which Dressrosa was apparently famous for. I didn't get that experience. I got just a really high quality, very compelling arc that I loved from start to finish. So maybe my Dressrosa experience was very different than a normal anime watcher's experience if they watched all the filler and stuff. One Piece did an extraordinary job of keeping everything flowing, keeping it moving, and it was great. I really, really like that arc, but I don't think anything will probably ever beat Marineford. I mean, I guess I can't say for sure because I don't know where One Piece is going to go, but Marineford was just a culmination of everything that had been building for so long in an extremely satisfying and emotional arc. This arc also opened my third eye to a painful revelation that I may not know what the One Piece is yet, but I do know what the one truth is. that Mihawk is a fraud. Mihawk clashed briefly with Vista in the Marineford arc, and it became abundantly clear that this man might just not be the world's greatest swordsman. Maybe he's like King from One Punch Man, where everyone just perceives him as this unbeatable, indomitable force of nature, but in reality, he's just not. We haven't seen Mihawk do a single fucking thing since he clashed with Zoro at the Baratier, like, 20 years ago. Like, it is so sad. Like, it is actually is so sad. He just gets by on aura and aura alone. Speaking of world's greatest swordsman, for the longest time throughout this series, my favorite character was Zoro. But now that I'm finally caught up, it's still Zoro. It was then and it is now. People like to boil him down to just being like a very one-dimensional flat character, but I just think that they're not watching the same show. That's so disingenuous. I can recognize that his motivations and a lot of the side quests, we'll call them, that he goes on are simpler than the rest of the crew, but that doesn't mean that he lacks as much depth as they have. I think Zoro is a perfect character to contrast the rest of the crew, and I always appreciate where he ends up throughout the arcs. My favorite villain is Doflamingo, but my most slept-on superstar is Magellan. I'm somewhat of a Magellan maniac. I believe that if that man could get off the toilet for even just an additional 3 or so hours and they'd let him spread his fucking wings outside of his prison, that man could be an actual threat. Now, of course, it's just pure delusion and hopium to believe that we might see him again engaging in the overall plot of One Piece. I think his role is kaput. He himself is a prisoner of the shitter, and he will probably never leave Impel Down. But I think if he ever did, he would genuinely be an extremely powerful character, even in like the current landscape of things. My most controversial take on One Piece is that Sabo is genuinely a fanfic character that you have to suspend disbelief in order to accept his presence in this series. I really, like, the more and more I think about Sabo, the less and less sense it makes for him to even be here. Just this secret third brother that just happens to pop up out of nowhere, and somehow he is the well-known second in command of the Revolutionary Army, a world-famous group, and yet somehow Ace, who himself is extremely notorious and high-ranking in the Whitebeard Pirates, never knew Sabo was alive? Was Ace illiterate? Maybe, but even if he was illiterate, why the fuck couldn't he see pictures in a newspaper? Did he never hear Sabo's name, even though apparently everyone knew about Sabo, who he was in the Revolutionary Army? And there was never anything in Ace's ear that was like, wait, Sabo, it's ringing a bell. My brother. It just doesn't compute, and especially the timing makes it even more fishy, where it feels like the sole reason behind Sabo's presence in the story is that he was drummed up, conjured as a replacement to Ace. He just happens to come through after Ace's death. He also gets Ace's devil fruit. It really feels like Sabo's entire purpose was just to be a Ace replacement. And the way Sabo even is used in the story itself is very odd. He's kind of here as like this all-powerful, damn near omniscient presence who can do everything and is used exclusively for like these fake-out moments. So like, he goes to the world government and like, the five elders attack him. He might be dead, but he's not dead. He's on an island. The island gets blown up. Sabo might be dead. He's not dead. It's like, it's very weird. Sabo as a character just doesn't really fit with the rest of the characters One Piece introduces. And it just feels like the way in which he is put into the story feels very forced and very out of left field. Now, not to be confused with me being a Sabo hater, I don't even really dislike him or anything. It just feels very odd how he gets into this story in the first place and the way in which he is used in the story. But his scenes are hype. Like, it is a cool sequence when he, like, tries to save Cobra and everything. Like, it is cool to watch, but I just don't think it makes a whole lot of sense how we even got to that point with Sabo in the first place is all. But still are cool sequences with Sabo, and I do think that he is an interesting character. Anyway, though, let's now dive into Egghead. So when I was first watching Egghead, I was a pretty vocal Scrooge on it. I didn't really love the first half of the Egghead arc. The second half, however, significantly better and much more invested. I think the second half of Egghead has been really, really, really good. First half, bit of a snoozer, but I do think it was necessary to eat your vegetables first here in this case because it does help lay the foundation and build the stakes for what comes in the second half. But yeah, I really was not liking the first half of Egghead. I really didn't like the Seraphim, by the way. I didn't think that they were a strong addition to the One Piece story. Vegapunk, love Vegapunk. I love everything with Stella. I think that is so good, and I really think I can't remember if I've been doing spoilers when going through my One Piece journey. I think for the most part I have been, because a lot of the arcs that I've been covering are like fucking 15 years old. But I don't know if I should do spoilers for Egghead since it's still fresh. I'll try and I'm gonna have to get into spoilers. There's no way I can talk about some of the things I didn't like about it without getting into spoilers. Let's start with the things that I really liked. Kuma's backstory. My oh my, did they hit a grand slam with Kuma's backstory. That is probably the peak flashback. I don't want to use the word arc because it's not a flashback arc, but peak emotional character backstory so far in the show. I thought they really crushed Kuma's story. It is tragic from top to bottom, and his whole existence in the show is just agony. And even where he ends up in Egghead here, there's nothing happy about it. For a character that himself is so positive, despite everything he went through as a child, with his parents and himself being enslaved and them being killed in front of him, with his father being murdered in front of him, still trying to find the light and still holding on to the hope of that legendary hero that will come to save them, and then trying to make a difference with the Revolutionary Army and saving people, and then himself still being dealt such a bad hand. There's always fingers crossed, hoping something finally goes Kuma's way, but it never does. Even when he's raising Bonnie, she's gonna die if he doesn't give over his humanity to the world government, to Vegapunk, to turn into this soulless killing machine, basically. The Pacifista program, all based around him, a weapon for the government. And he does it out of love for his daughter. But to save her, he had to abandon her. And then she went on her own pirate journey quest. Now she's gotten the truth, wants revenge on the 5 elders who were overseeing the program, in particular, Saturn. And Saturn becomes like our main big bad of the arc, and I think he's a really good villain. And he's not alone. There are other villains there like Rob Lucci and Kaku, whom I do think they're good villains, but I didn't like the flip-flopping so many times there. I think that was a little overdone. I get why it's there. Stussy also being there. Her role was very cool. That was quite the plot twist reveal there with her role and everything. But even though I like Rob Lucci and Kaku, like their presence there, the amount of flip-flopping I think was just a bit excessive. But in addition to their presence being there, there's also Kizaru. And Kizaru is a very interesting villain because prior to this, we'd always seen him as just like this callous, uncaring, calm, cold, bad guy. Like, do I need to kill them? Fine, I suppose it would be stimulating. I am a little bored. Here I go, reluctantly killing for the sake of the government. And that's all you ever really got, so you're under the impression that he's just like this guy who will do pretty much everything and he won't feel anything. Just basically a heartless bad guy. Well, here we get a lot more fleshing out, a lot more backstory, and it turns out he is actually somewhat intertwined deeply with Bonnie, Kuma, Vegapunk. So when he is tasked by Saturn to kill Vegapunk and Bonnie, he really doesn't want to. You can start to see emotion in this character. When he does ultimately kill Vegapunk, he is anything but happy. And it feels like there's almost this sense of relief when Luffy is able to actually overpower him. And he makes like the treasonous decision to feed Luffy when Luffy was, out of energy, out of power, so that we can continue to fight against Saint Saturn. So we got a lot more out of him, and I thought it was really interesting, and I'm so curious to see what his motivations are. What does he want? What is his goal? What is he doing? It's so good the way a lot of these things were built up and how they were executed here so far in Egghead. This is also the arc in which we get the most exposition on the Void Century and filling in the blanks for everything that's been happening that has been a mystery to this point, like with the Poneglyphs, Joy Boy. Vegapunk gives a final message to the entire world, revealing so much information, much to the chagrin of the Five Elders, whom show up at Egghead to try and put the kibosh on the broadcast and shut everything down because they can't have these secrets getting out about what's happened in the past. It's just really satisfying now because it feels like we're finally starting to see the big picture. We're starting to get these breadcrumbs to follow for what it all means and what actually happened 800-900 years ago. Who is Joy Boy and everything? Who are the Five Elders in Emu? Like, what is all of this? It's so, like, it's hard to not, like, wait on bated breath for the next episode and the next big reveal. Oh, also, one of my earlier complaints with this show, like the whole series, is that there was always this hesitation to kill someone, even if their role in it had been finished, like their whole arc. Like a Arlong or someone. Like, pretty much a villain who served their purpose that I don't think we'll ever see again. The show still had a tendency to just, like, knock them out and move on. They fainted, and that's it. Never to be seen again. And they did that with, like, every character, not just villains, but, like, any character I thought that they were setting up for a death didn't die, most notably, like, Pell, like, so long ago. And I get with Pell there was a lot of stuff going on at the time there with Pell, which maybe led for him not ultimately facing a demise there. I get that, but that's just another example that I'm pulling from. There are countless others of characters that I thought should have died there to amplify the emotional stakes of what was being built to. With Egghead, though, no longer does it feel like there is a hesitation to kill off characters. There is a lot of character deaths in here that I didn't expect, that I didn't see coming, that are important characters. So it really does feel like we're reaching the end game here. I just wanted to make a mention of that. No longer is that like a complaint I have with recent One Piece. They are like actively killing characters. Like it feels like it's getting much more intense. Now, one of my biggest complaints so far about Egghead, though, and it's not even in the first half, it actually is in the second half, bringing all five elders here, I think just kind of made them seem weaker than they are. So, I like Saint Saturn as a villain. I think he's a great villain. But him actually fighting Luffy, he looks like a bitch. And I get Luffy, as, you know, the new Joy Boy, is supposed to be absolutely fucking stomping this man. He's basically blue waffling all over Saint Saturn. It's not even really a contest. But Saint Saturn as a fighter is really underwhelming. He's basically like the Derek Zoolander of the One Piece universe. He has one move. He has one look. And it's just by throwing out his little spider legs, and that's it. He doesn't do anything besides that. Even when he's not fighting Luffy, and he's like going after the rest of the Straw Hat crew, he can't even like kill them because he's only using his spider legs and nothing else. And then he's like, oh, this is a waste of my fucking time. I'm just going to run. So he does. So he goes to the next thing. These insects, I won't bother with them. Like, it just makes him look like not a very terrifying presence. And when they brought the other five elders in there, the same phenomenon happened where, because now there's so many, they can't give a whole lot of focus to them. So instead, they all only do one thing. Workery, I think, is the best example of that. That fucking goober is the equivalent to that goddamn Rick and Morty butter robot whose only purpose is to serve butter. All Workery can do is go into boar form and charge. That is all they show him doing. All he does is just charge. So like when the Giants arrive, which, by the way, super hype. I'm extremely excited that Elbaf is being brought into the Mega Mix here. Bragi Dory back in the fold now. It's very exciting that they're there. They're having a good time. They're super powerful. And Workery, all he does is just charge and headbutt. That's it. It just makes him seem kind of lame. He's like a E-Honda player in Street Fighter 6 just spamming that one headbutt special. That is all Workery does. So, like, it just makes it feel like he's not really a threat. He only can do one thing, and he's not even succeeding at it. Like, he's not even doing a good job with headbutting. And that's just so underwhelming for these five elders, whom we have this entire time been led to believe probably the most fearsome, terrifying creatures on the fucking face of that planet. And yet here all five of them are just getting toyed with, really. Getting laughed at, getting blasted around. Like they can't even stop a broadcast. Like they can't even find the transponder snail and destroy enough things to stop it. Granted, they have to be a little careful with the mother flame. I get that, but they just don't look as strong as we've been led to believe because now all five of them were here, still basically getting embarrassed. Like so far, there hasn't been a moment where I'm actually concerned about a character because of the five elders' presence, because they're just not good at doing anything they aim to do here. I think it would have just been far stronger if it was only Saint Saturn who was up against everyone, the Giants, Luffy, the Straw Hat crew, all while trying to stop Vegapunk's desperate broadcast to the rest of the world to get the truth out there. And Saint Saturn, against all these odds, is still making it a close fight. That, I think, would have been a really strong showcase for the five elders and how scary they can be, that one of them is able to go against all the strongest in the universe there. But the fact that all five show up and still can't succeed, it makes it seem like, well, Luffy will probably end up just fucking dog walking them at some point. Like, it doesn't really feel like they're as terrifyingly powerful as I thought they were now. Whereas, again, if it was just Saturn there, I'd be left thinking like, damn, this is just one of them able to, do so much across all of Egghead here. I can't even imagine what'll happen when the other four get involved. But now I don't have to imagine. I know what happens when the other four get involved. Still fucking nothing. They still can't, kill even, a giant or anything. They can't stop a broadcast. They can't do shit. It just makes it feel like the five elders are just kind of weak. That's just, my main complaint so far with Egghead. It kind of took a lot of the oomph out of the five elders. Anyway, though, that's really, my only major complaint with the second half of Egghead. Like I said, didn't love the first half, but maybe it just wasn't my cup of tea. There's really nothing in there in particular I think was bad. Even with the five elders, I don't think it's bad. It's just, I don't know, it felt a little underwhelming given how much had been built up about them is all. But overall, I think it's a very strong arc, and I'm really, really happy that I caught up to One Piece and I get to enjoy this in real time now as we're entering, the end of this legendary series. I think it's a masterpiece. I will say, though, I don't expect anyone to follow suit and, force themselves to watch 300 episodes if they're not enjoying it. I think it's totally fine if you just don't like One Piece after X amount of episodes to just say it's not for you and be done with it. There's nothing wrong with that. I probably would have done the same thing if it wasn't for me being so spiteful. I probably wouldn't have pushed through as hard as I did, and then I did actually fall in love with it. Again, not Stockholm Syndrome, just an acquired taste. My taste buds got a little more refined is all, as the show got better. Anyway, I just wanted to give you this yearly update here, basically. Fully caught up, we fucking did it. That's really about it. See ya.